When handed a hospital bill with a $50,000 total at the bottom, you might assume the owner is running a money printer. Medicine is the product of a pharmacy. A hospital deals in a different commodity, a state of constant, expensive availability. This is the business of readiness. You are paying for immediate access to a fortifying building, trained experts, and surgical equipment at the exact second something goes wrong. This ledger displays the simple formula governing the business. Total revenue equals the number of patients that walk through the door, multiplied by the average amount they pay. The terrifying catch for anyone operating one of these facilities is that you control nothing on the right side of that equation. You cannot decide how many people get sick on a Tuesday, and you don't dictate what an insurance company is willing to pay you for treating them. Because the hospital owner cannot predict demand or guarantee a price, the facility functions as a fragile economic tightrope rather than a reliable cash machine. On the left side of the equation, the costs are rigid. A hospital burns through tens of millions of dollars just to keep the lights on before the first patient is even admitted. Building a facility from the ground up starts with a massive entry fee. The empty shell alone costs roughly $1 million per bed. A moderate 120-bed facility requires $100 million just for walls, wiring, and plumbing. Then comes the equipment. A standard mid-range MRI scanner, the kind a typical community hospital needs to function, runs between $1 and $3 million. That machine requires a custom magnetically shielded room with reinforced flooring and specialized cooling systems. That site preparation can add another $1.6 million to the bill before the first scan is performed. Staffing is the heaviest recurring burden, eating up 60% of total operating costs. Doctors, nurses, and technicians are paid for 24-hour shifts, regardless of whether the emergency room sees 3 patients or 30. These astronomical, immovable expenses are the cost of existing. They arrive in full every month, regardless of how much revenue flows through the front doors. Administrators survive this weight through internal subsidy, using profitable departments to quietly fund the loss leaders. This scale shows how the math works. By law, an emergency room cannot turn away a patient based on their ability to pay, making it a guaranteed cost center. To balance that out, hospitals depend on elective surgeries, like knee replacements, which generate high margins. However, even those profitable procedures depend entirely on the payer mix. The exact same surgery yields wildly different revenue depending on whether the patient is covered by private insurance, a government program, or has no insurance at all. This fragile math explains why a struggling rural hospital will occasionally go up for sale at an incredible discount. The purchase carries a rigid cost structure attached to a patient population far too small to sustain it. Heating bills and malpractice premiums do not shrink when volume drops. Because those costs are permanent, nearly half of all rural hospitals lose money every single year. You cannot outrun the asymmetry equation. The collapse of Steward Healthcare, run by a former cardiac surgeon named Ralph de la Torre, shows what happens when this balance breaks for a massive chain. At its peak, Steward operated over 30 hospitals and appeared to have the scale necessary to survive the industry's thin margins. In 2016, Steward sold the physical real estate beneath its hospitals to an investment company, then leased those same buildings back at a high annual cost. This move converted the company into a tenant, stacking billions in mandatory, immovable rent onto their rigid cost structure. Crushing lease payments drained the cash reserves needed for day-to-day operations. Medical vendors went unpaid, and eventually they stopped delivering essential supplies. At one Boston hospital, a new mother died from internal bleeding after a vendor repossessed the specific medical equipment needed to stop her hemorrhage. The invoice for that equipment had gone unpaid. Scale offered no protection from the debt. The moment the fixed lease obligations eclipsed the unpredictable revenue, the entire system suffocated. By May of 2024, Steward filed for bankruptcy with $9 billion in liabilities, resulting in the permanent closure of multiple community hospitals. When those facilities close, the impact is measured in time. In one Massachusetts town, ambulance transport times jumped by 20% because patients had to be driven significantly farther to reach the next open emergency room. A hospital is a permanent, immovable cost structure, hopelessly exposed to a revenue stream that the owner does not control. The physical building and the $3 million MRI machines are merely the equipment of the trade. The patients and the insurance companies paying for them are the only true asset. If that foundation shifts even slightly, the entire multi-million-dollar structure above it collapses.